Welcome to a Case of Digital podcast. This time I've got Rob Goodison, who I've been working with for a while, and I want to basically share his insights and story, the kinds of things that I hear on a daily basis from Rob. I want to give you guys the benefit of that. Rob's also got some kind of tips and tricks and some insights into the world of SEO and digital in general. Hopefully you guys will find this useful. So, introducing Rob, for those who don't know you, why don't you just give a quick overview about yourself and who you are?
Thanks for having me on the show, Paul. So I've been working at 77 for a couple of years now as the SEO strategist. I've got a background working across the board in digital, but my main skill is around SEO. And at the moment, I'm working across the board with variety of e-commerce clients, such as fashion, bedding, that kind of stuff. It's quite interesting.
It's mainly e-commerce that we work in, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think more recently it's been e-commerce.
Definitely.
But initially, when you first joined, we were working on some e-commerce, some B2B. We've done some charity stuff. We've done different kinds of things, haven't we, really?
If you can go back even further, I've done all sorts of crazy things, like worked on a Botox company once.
Right, okay. Well, we might touch on that a little bit later on. So, with regards to like how it all started for you, like how did you get into the industry and what was your route into the industry?
When I was at university, I was doing a music industry management degree. Through that, I started putting on my own gigs, events, and things like that. Basically, the band I was in at the time just couldn't get any gigs, so do it yourself. That's the idea, basically.
Because you've always been into music, haven't you?
Yeah.
Like this, I suppose. Google is your second passion.
Yeah, Google is the second love after music.
Yeah, okay.
So basically got into the music industry side of things, started doing events, got to go to South by Southwest and put on a couple of gigs there. But the thing I really liked about that was more kind of the marketing side, putting up posters, putting in events out through Facebook. So this is like 2010 when this was kind of still a fairly new kind of thing to do, really.
Yeah. Didn't have social media to the level that you got today as well.
Yeah, exactly. So,
whereas everything's growing through social media now, isn't it?
Instagram didn't exist, and it's kind of interesting to kind of keep one eye on that kind of music industry marketing thing.
It's crazy. YouTube as well. Like a lot of people using YouTube, like the artist H who came in here. For those who don't know, because I didn't at the time, because I'm pretty old.
We're both over 30.
H is a rapper from Manchester, and he came into our studios to shoot a music video for Taste, and I didn't realise how big he was. And then kind of 6 days later of uploading it onto his YouTube channel, he's got 4 million views or something stupid. So YouTube, although it was around, it was a lot less kind of reach, engagement, and number of active users to what it is today. So I suppose back then in 2010, it is kind of back in the day, isn't it? Early stages of digital and how you actually make things work. Predominantly people using Google advertising and email marketing back then, right? Yeah.
And through that, basically started putting on my own events. Then that kind of took off a little bit for a while. Like I ran my own night for a while in Manchester.
Where at?
In Withington.
All right. Okay.
So just south Manchester, just near Didsbury. Just booked out a pub upstairs basically, and just kind of made that into a thing.
Yeah.
So that was quite good for a while, and then through that, kind of met a contact of mine who was like a designer at this book company called Blue Sky Books. So kind of worked my way into that as like the general digital copywriter guy. They did it was weird. They did books and they also did kind of website design as well, kind of a side thing. And the side gig started becoming a bigger thing for them.
Yeah, it was like a transitional phase.
Yeah. So then off the back of that, eventually that was just an internship. So I kind of used that to jump to the University of Salford, working as a marketing person there for their events side of things, basically. So we did all sorts, basically any kind of like CPD, professional development course. That'd be kind of what we'd be pushing out there. So it'd be like nurses, it'd be business courses, if you can think of it. We did a course about it, basically.
So what was it in those early stages? What was it? Because although you've developed skills in other areas, you predominantly started out in SEO, didn't you? What was the main draw of SEO and the kind of practices and everything else like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I kind of, because with the Blue Sky Books job, kind of just started doing copywriting. And through copywriting at the time, you start becoming familiar with tools such as Moz. That was kind of the big gateway for me, basically, like the Moz Beginner's Guide. Like it's still being updated to this day. Just reading through that beginner's guide to basically learn the basics.
This isn't a question in the thing, and this is probably left field from what we've prepared, but when did you fall in love with Rand Fishkin?
That's the beard.
Yeah, he's so good, isn't he? For those who don't know, Rand Fishkin is the guy who started Moz. I recently listened to a podcast on him, and he started it out of nothing, pretty much with his mum, actually. Which was like back in the days of like early SEO, and there's a lot of black hat techniques. And what he did is his blog was kind of demystifying what's going on in SEO, and then he turned that blog into a consulting business. Now we've turned it into a software business, and it's probably one of the biggest names in SEO now, isn't it?
Yeah.
In terms of the SEOs, it's the SEO's place to hang out, kind of thing, and the tools to use, etc., etc. So, when did you first come across him?
I think so. When I was working at the University of Salford, we did actually sell a digital marketing course.
What year was this roughly?
2012, 2013, roughly.
Yeah.
So it was around the time of like Panda and Penguin really kind of taking its effect on a lot of businesses and them having to adapt to that. So there was a lecturer at the university that I knew at the time called Alex Fenton, and he was like the digital lecturer there. And he was like, "Oh, check this out." Yeah. I think of that, he basically introduced me to Moz and a couple of other really good blogs at the time.
Cool.
And it was interesting doing that as well, that course, because you'd sit there and it'd be just like regular small business owners that we kind of work with at the moment, those types, trying to do it themselves a little bit. And you'd see people like, there was a guy, I can't remember what his business was, but he'd been hit really badly by either Panda or Penguin. And you just saw the traffic completely plummet.
For those who don't know, Google Panda and Google Penguin are algorithm updates that affect the search engines for Google. So it's not that an animal's like a rampaging animal's gone in. That was quite a geeky SEO deep cut. But the algorithm updates often have a name attached to them, and Penguin and Panda were updates that affected quite a lot of websites, let's be honest. And if you might, there are some businesses that are still having problems from it now based on their link profile or their content and other things like that. But those algorithm updates, you've got to keep an eye on it as you're going through. And I think, especially when taking it back to that small business owner, they don't know about this. It's kind of out there, but it's out there for marketeers, but not necessarily for business owners. They're too busy running their own business, aren't they? So,
I mean, you have it's kind of crazy the amount of algorithm updates that kind of go on each year. So last year, I think I saw a stat saying it was like 3,500.
Yes.
Various size algorithm updates. Some bigger stuff like the Medic update, some smaller things where it'll just be like a slight tweak.
I think there are 200 major.
200 major ranking factors go into the algorithm, but they make changes literally every day.
I think it was 200 or 400 major updates. I saw an update or a blog post recently, and it was just kind of like, there are thousands that go on all the time because they're split testing data all the time, particularly Google, obviously, that we're talking about. But the major ones that really start to affect sites. And I was blown away about it being a couple of hundred or a couple of thousand. In reality, I think that's just going to continue to grow, and you're going to be looking at a couple of hundred per month probably in the not too distant future with AI and the machine learning stuff that we were talking about recently. Looks like Google's really kind of on the warpath to keep updating their algorithm and improving it over time. So, Rob, from your perspective, how has SEO changed over the years that you've been working in it? Because how long have you been working in the industry now with regards to digital?
7
or 8 years, is it?
Probably about 2011 was when I graduated, and then kind of pretty much straight out of university went straight to that Blue Sky Books.
Yeah.
Can't pronounce it. Anyway, so since around then really is when I kind of got familiar with SEO, and it just I evolved kind of with the industry, I think, because I was quite young at the time. Those were the days.
What are the so from when you first started to where we're at today? What are the key differences really in the because the thing is with SEO, it's an opinion-based thing.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, you get some indication on the algorithm updates and everything else, but because Google don't brand out and publish out exactly do these 10 things and it'll work, a lot of it is opinions. There are different opinions in the industry, but I think one of the issues that we have is that some people have dealt with people who have like old school ways of working, and old school ways of working don't work in the modern day for Google. So what were the things that worked back then when you first started, and then how's that changed over time?
I mean, back then it was, some pretty kind of what we call shady tactics. Now you could still kind of get away with doing. I didn't really do it at the time, but I knew people who did, where you add a bunch of keywords to the footer, or the kind of shadier tactics that got kind of taken care of as part of like a series of algorithm updates. I think the main thing that's changed, as you rightly pointed out, people sometimes have perceptions that SEO is what it was in 2011, 2012, 2013, but now it's more about building a brand, essentially, just making sure that people recognize who your brand are, because that'll lead to an increased click-through rate when you do appear in the search results.
Yeah, and I think the practices have evolved over time, and the practices will continue to evolve over time because there are technologies available now that weren't available back then. Websites and the process of building websites has changed quite dramatically, because when you first came into the industry, and it's the same with me, it was a desktop game, really. It was a laptop or desktop kind of website experience. You didn't really, mobile phones were having really basic kind of access and connectivity with regards to building up to 3G at the time. And, when I joined the industry, there wasn't even 4G at the time. I think that only came in early stages of when I joined. And now the user behaviors change so much, and the usage of the internet in in its various guises through social media apps or web browsing, e-commerce, etc., etc. It's just come on leaps and bounds, hasn't it? So a lot of the tactics that would work back then to get you the rankings, well, for a start, there are millions of more web pages and listings that you've got to compete against. But then also, the practices and the way that you build things is, mobile first, and website speed's essential, and caching systems have changed, and all those things, it's changed full circle pretty much, in terms of where we started.
I agree with that. I think as well, the impact that has on organizations is, it used to be the case that the SEO guy could just collaborate with the web designer, and they just form their own little team.
It used to be more of a tech role.
But now you've got to kind of get input from UX designers, other people who are kind of have a stakeholder.
Content marketing is a massive element, obviously.
And I think the results that people are getting from SEO has made it a bigger deal in the minds of maybe people who are further up the chain now. So there's more kind of demands from them of what do we need to do to kind of increase our SEO impact. And
we've recently gone for an exercise of putting some guides together, some introductory guides for clients. They're available on the 77 website to download. There's my first plug. So when we were going through that process, obviously we were trying to break everything down in really simple terms for mainly business owners, startups, SMEs, or marketers who come from more of a traditional marketing background but don't understand Google. When we went through creating those guides, we basically distilled it into 4 key approaches, didn't we? When we were talking about, how you optimize and how you put things across, we like to talk internally. We like to talk to clients, and we have them in this white paper. We've put things into 4 key buckets. I think it's worth just give us a quick overview, and for the people listening to this, hopefully more people than just my mum this time. Hi,
Paul's mum.
Hi, Bernadette. So with regards to the kind of key areas. What are those? And just try and break this down for people who are new to the subject matter, for example.
Yeah. So for me, the main things are on-page SEO, which is basically how your website looks, behaves, what content you're including on that particular page. Like if you're targeting a specific keyword, that should be on there, and the title tag, the H1, the meta.
Yeah.
Those kind of elements all kind of make up an important part of the on-page SEO.
Yeah, and that's a combination in the modern day. That's a combination of working with a developer, but also optimizing through your CMS. If you're on Shopify, if you're on Magento or WordPress, you can use. There are good tools now where you don't necessarily need a developer to do a lot of those on-page things. A lot of that is in the content and how you update your website. So if you're on any one of those platforms or, countless other kind of CMS platforms, the on-page SEO side of things is mainly planning things out and then implementing it through your CMS.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The technical side of SEO, so this just involves bug fixing, making sure your site's really fast, that it works on mobile, and just sorting out things like, missing meta tags, missing titles. Basically, it's kind of running through an audit to identify what the most important technical factors are on your site and how to improve them.
And from a tech SEO perspective, when we're working with clients, or if anyone out there is kind of optimizing their own website, we run monthly audits, don't we, essentially? So we have a cycle where we would run an audit, which is kind of like an MOT. We've got an 80-point checklist that we run through. We then we then check, okay, here's some errors here, there's some warnings, here's some errors, they're the things that we need to pick up. Now, from a tech SEO perspective, that is when you start to need to really know what you're talking about from a development perspective.
Yeah.
You need to understand website code, hierarchy, structure, URL strings, those kinds of things. Generally speaking, we would work, the in-house team can do a lot of that with regards to like the tech SEO, but also you might need to work with like a third, the client's developer or the client's website developer or our developers if we built the website to update some of these things, because they are quite technical, aren't they?
Yeah.
Clues in the title, I suppose.
Off-page SEO. So this is basically building links back to your website, and it helps to kind of think of like a link as a bit of a vote for your website. But not all votes are equal in this kind of strange e-commerce SEO democracy thingy with Google as the overlord here.
I often find like link building and, off-page SEO and how people have approached that in the past. That is one of the practices. We were talking before about like people using old school tactics.
Yeah.
I think that off-page SEO is one of those things that is, if you talk to 5 different SEOs, you might get 5 different answers, because I've got an opinion on certain things, and you've got to do things that work well for the brand. But then, is it about the quality of the links? Is it about the quantity of the links? Like, what is your approach to that off-page side of things?
I think we definitely go for quality over the quantity side of things. I think, if you produce like a really great piece of content, which we'll get into in a moment, that gives you a really obvious place to build links towards, and within that content itself you can internally link to other pages that are crucial to your e-commerce strategy. So one tactic that we kind of do on a regular basis is we have a tool that looks for broken links on content that's similar to the content we've produced.
Yeah.
So say if you make a guide like, what is SEO? And then we want to build links to the SEO thing that we've done, we would look at other websites that have linked out to an SEO guide before, but content breaks, over
web
time.
Pages go down.
Exactly, yeah.
Businesses don't exist, they rebrand, whatever, they've not redirected the website.
Yeah. And say if someone's linking out to an SEO guide that's now broken, we would contact them, say, hey, this page has a broken link. We've just written a more up-to-date, descriptive, comprehensive guide on this subject. Would you mind linking to us? And 9 times out of 10, because we're helping that user, improve their website, they usually do agree to that.
Yeah, because people don't want to send links to like dead links, do they? So.
The worst thing in the world you can do is kind of template an email where it's like, hey, I was just thinking about you as I was walking through the park or whatever it is, every kind of website bloggers kind of receive these on a day-to-day basis. You have to personalize it to that blogger or whoever the resource is at that point.
I think as well, the evolution of how link building has changed over time is fairly dramatic. But I think one thing's consistent throughout. It's still a core part of the algorithm. The algorithm is still based on a lot on this.
Yeah,
and pretty much probably always will be, I think.
Yeah, Google try to kind of downplay it a little bit because I think they don't want people just, focusing on this as the main thing above all else. But, it kind of shows when you actually do build some links to some content, it has a really positive impact on where you rank.
And this off-page SEO, when we're often having conversations with clients, now there's a bit of a, over time, because of the rise of social media, Instagram influencers in particular, I'm thinking more recently, there's a bit of a blurred line between outreach, off-page SEO and influencer outreach in terms of, it's somebody who just has an Instagram profile or has an Instagram profile and a blog. Like, what's the differences between those two? Because we clearly define the differences between them, don't we?
Yeah, I think on the influencer side, where maybe they're working from with a brand as like a digital PR exercise, that's got less value it has value, but it's not the same kind of thing that we'd be kind of focusing on for an SEO campaign. What we want to do really is kind of create content that is link worthy from other blogs. Like I was saying before in the previous example, if someone else has a list of SEO resources and that's a really strong page, we would want to get on that page as well.
Yeah, and I think there's different ways of approaching that particular area, but I think from an SEO perspective, that's the best advice is obviously it's always about relevancy.
Yeah.
It's always about quality. If that's the default that you always go back to and you're unsure about somebody, are they relevant to your brand? Are they adding value and quality to your business and your brand? Again, we talk a lot about brand with SEO, particularly now, like you mentioned earlier. And then, what's the value that's going to give to your customers and your users? So with regards to the kind of final element then of SEO, of how we like to approach it.
Yeah, so we touched on this a little bit, but essentially content marketing, and that's becoming more and more important as the years have rolled by, basically.
It's probably been big in the last 5 years, hasn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I think this kind of the go-to stuff for a lot of brands now is to do like an in-depth piece of content on their site. Like, say if you're you sell homeware, or you say you're like an IKEA type thing, you would do something that's like a guide to small living rooms or whatever. Yeah. That kind of content really helps people at the discovery stage.
And when we're talking in-depth content, because this often confuses people about what we mean by content, because the word content is such a broad area. Obviously 77, we're a content agency, but we do video, we do photography, and just in video and photography, there's probably like 20 different things that you can do. Yeah. So when we say content, let's just drill down into the specifics, because when we talk word count of blogs and articles and guides and all that stuff, I think some people still think that you can just write a 200 to 300 word post and get away with it. That's not really acceptable. It's not good enough, is it? So no. What would you recommend in that space?
For the in-depth stuff, really, you kind of have to look at what your competitors are doing at that point. Like, generally, we advise kind of a rough word count of around 2,000 words, but the industry is evolving beyond that a little bit as well now, where it's more about, say if the top 3 pieces of content for a keyword that you're targeting, one answers one element of that question, another one answers the other one, and another one answers the other one. We might look at those 3 and say, okay, well, let's write a guide that includes all 3 of those answers to the question in one place, and then add a bit more onto it. And then you've answered the question more comprehensively than the other people who are ranking.
Yeah, so it's really all around depth of content, quality of content, and investing the time and effort, because a lot of clients, a lot of people you talk to in general, they're like, 2,000 words, are you mad? It's kind of like, what are we supposed to be doing in this space that we can actually write 2,000 words for? And also, I think from our perspective, when we're creating content, how can you not stretch it, but how can you write 2,000 words, which is appealing to the not just the search engine, but the actual user to keep them engaged. So I think that's where the creative team comes in a little bit.
Yeah.
Tries to make the creative assets good and everything else. So
going back to that collaboration, making sure the UX people have a stake in how a blog looks, it's really important.
So just to recap the kind of key areas that we focus on as an agency, and there are other things that go underneath this, but on-page SEO, tech SEO, off-page SEO, and then content marketing. They're the key kind of foundations for SEO success, aren't they?
The pillars.
Yeah. Good. So, Rob, I listen to Tim Ferriss quite a lot, and he often, when he's talking to people, asks them about their routines and things that they do on a regular basis to try and, like, just in general, really, not necessarily just your career. I mean, we can touch on that as well, but do you have any kind of routines or rituals that you go through on a kind of weekly basis or daily basis?
Recently I've started cycling to work as a bit of a change. But I do think actually that if you've ever kind of gone, oh, that sounds interesting, that beats the commute and stuff, I definitely recommend it to people, because you come in with a much more kind of positive mind frame. You're a lot more awake than if you're kind of just stuck on a bus trying not to fall asleep.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. Since I started getting the train this year, in 2019, since the beginning of 2019. And there's just something about not being sat in your car kind of in traffic in Manchester, which is just horrific in general. Getting the train in and you walked, you're up and about walking. It's kind of like wakes you up and stuff. I definitely feel like that side of things does help. And you come into the office like fresh. Obviously, when it comes to Manchester traffic and weather, it's not the best.
But take your pick. If you're either on the bike, you get soaked. If you're on the bus, you get stressed.
Yeah. So, when when you're talking to other people, is there any kind of most shared pieces of content that you often give people, or is there a book that you send to people? Your most gifted book?
Yeah. So on the blog side of things, big fan of Beginner's Guide to SEO for Moz. If anyone was kind of interested in getting into
that's amazing, isn't it? It's probably the best resource for anybody getting into SEO, apart from this podcast.
Yeah. The other side of stuff as well would be like Brian Dean's Backlinko guides. They're always fantastic, and they're also a great example of what we mean when we say in-depth content, because the guy's writing sometimes 20,000 word posts, and they're just kind of absolutely amazing. I'm like, I don't know where he finds the time to do all that.
So that's backlink.io.
Backlinko.com, I think.
Yeah.
If you Google Backlinko, it'll come up.
Yeah.
Other kind of things that are worth reading are Neil Patel. Sometimes I find his tips are really they're quite good for kind of beginners. But the thing that people don't kind of consider when you look at Neil Patel is he's an amazing copywriter. Like, if you're learning how to do copy, check out the way he does his emails and stuff, because you always end up clicking, even if you kind of like, it's another email, but you end up clicking every time.
Yeah.
And from a book perspective, something that I really enjoyed reading was Confessions of an Advertising Man.
Oh, okay.
Which is the author. It's a kind of autobiography / help guide by David Ogilvy,
right.
Who's one of the founders of Ogilvy and Mather.
Yeah.
It's kind of like if you like Mad Men, this is kind of the real life story.
Yeah.
Because he's there in the 60s writing ads, but some of the tips he's got on there are really cool around like running agencies, and also just how to kind of run a team essentially.
It's funny when you take that as a throwback of how they used to do ads back in the day in the 60s and 70s in the Mad Men era. If you apply that today to Facebook or to your Google or your YouTube pre-roll or whatever it might be, the principles still stand up, don't they? It's just a different medium today, isn't it? So
it's knowing your audience more than they know themselves, essentially.
Strange question to ask you, but what's your favourite failure in your career so far?
Ooh, that's always the difficult interview question, isn't it? I think.
Well, I'm here to ask the difficult questions.
I think for me, it was kind of like when I was working at the University of Salford. So, like, I think anyone who's listening, who's worked in the public sector before, will kind of appreciate that there can be a hell of a lot of red tape. when you're working in that kind of environment. I think trying to get like people to adapt on the team to, digital, particularly SEO, and get kind of buy-in from more senior people can be really difficult. And at that time, I think I was still quite young and still not quite as advanced in the SEO side of things. I
think confidence and communication
it's confidence
probably play a part in that, don't they?
Yeah, definitely. And I think the other side as well, so getting that buy-in was difficult. I think learning that you need to document processes and get that down, that's really important. And I think for a long time, I kind of went, processes, who needs that? I think I've always been one of those people who don't like kind of, showing you working out or, that kind of thing. So processes always felt a little bit kind of an antithesis to it. It's like, no, I'll just write an advert or I'll do a blog or something like that, but you need to document it.
It's funny with any process like that. Like if you get a winning formula in your head and you have a process that you work through and you've put your heart and soul into it, it's very difficult to then put that down on paper and share that with other people because you feel like that's yours. Whereas I have always seen that as a position of strength. If you have the confidence to document your process, share it with people, have the confidence to know that you're happy with what you've done, but also listen to feedback. How can you improve it? It actually brings people into the conversation, and I think that is 80% of the issue with the SEO industry in general is that people don't want to let people in. People want to continue to act like SEO is this, dark art that, and they almost feel happy about that. Some of the kind of traditional SEOs, whereas I think what's happened probably in the last 2-3 years where content marketing's taken over, non-technical, non-SEO people are now working in SEO jobs. And they're happy to share what they're doing. They're happy to have a conversation around what they're doing. Whereas before it was like, I'm SEO consultant X and I'm not going to give away my secret playbook because I want as much business or retainers as possible. I think that is a really kind of dated view. And I think you're right. If you document the process as well, the thing that I look at from that is if you document your process, you can then go to scale.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think we're getting to a point now where we're kind of bringing in the next generation of SEO people, and the only way you can really teach them is if you've got a strong process that you believe in.
Yeah, shout out to Imogen G on that one. The future of SEO, as far as I'm concerned, yeah. No, I think you're absolutely right. I think as well it helps when you're talking to a client or if you're talking to a stakeholder, a senior person. CEOs don't know how the Google algorithm works, and you've got to break it down to them in terms of, right, okay, there's an 80-point checklist here. We've done 50, we've completed 50 of them, but there's another 30 that we need to go away and fix. So, we're just over halfway through the process. And then you can break it down into terms that people can understand. So, I think that's definitely a good learning, but also another good thing to talk to other people about. Just thinking about the future of SEO. It's kind of it's a broad question, but how do you see things going in the short to medium term? I don't want to talk long term because we're at the whim of the technology, but
I'll put my crystal ball away.
Put that crystal ball away. From a short to medium term, what do you think is going to change in the SEO industry, and what do people need to know about?
I think there's two things that are going to be like major contributors to the way that SEO is kind of shaped going into the 20s. And one tool that I found that I think is going to be really a bit of a game changer in the short term. So the two concepts that are going to impact SEO the most are automation. At the moment, Google's algorithm is all pretty much automated. It's making decisions quicker than any human can, which is, a massive thing in, trying to figure out how that works.
And for those who don't know, what data points does the algorithm use to make decisions? Because they use things that they didn't used to use before, like analytics and website data, user interaction data.
Yeah, it's monitoring essentially what people do when they land on a page and using that to kind of almost score a page themselves.
In the SERPs as well, and how people are clicking through from the SERPs.
Because Google's product has always been make the best search engine possible.
Yes,
and the way to kind of fulfill that is by giving them the best content possible for each query.
Yeah.
So the other half as well would be voice search, which basically, I think we're in this kind of weird limbo state a little bit where, it's in pretty much everyone's homes or getting to that point. Did you hear that story about that girl who, like, her mum took her phone off her and all her devices, and she ended up tweeting through the fridge?
No.
she had a smart fridge. And
a smart fridge.
She's like an influencer, some one of these like teenage influencers or something like that.
Right.
And like her mum took all the devices off because she started a fire because she wasn't paying attention. And the kid, figured out how to use the fridge to tweet.
Weird I never thought I'd hear that. That's some Skynet stuff. Yeah, that's really weird.
But forget the long term.
Yeah.
And I think so. We're in this kind of middle bit where, because Google Analytics, for example, doesn't really have like a way to analyze your voice search. The things that are kind of important for voice search right now are your schema markup. So it's just kind of adding in answers to questions essentially, and more product details and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it's very difficult to analyze what impact that's having on your website at this point. I'm sure it'll get solved in the next couple of years though.
Yeah, I think as that technology evolves, and I think plays a bigger part, because the quality of the input, the data input, as in like, I might have my Apple AirPods and I'll start to talk to Siri or whatever, but it still doesn't quite understand my accent. It misreads things, and then you just think, oh, screw it, it's quicker for me to just type something in. Yeah. Whereas I think that what we're talking about with, Alexa, Google, the home devices that Google are developing, et cetera, that just needs to improve. The technology, the mainstream technology needs to catch up before voice really takes off. But we're probably what we're talking in the next 5 years?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's probably going to be much, much bigger, and will progressively get bigger. I think it's one of those things like maybe a little bit like responsive design, where a lot more people were working on responsive design at first, and it was like a new thing. Like we used to say, oh, we do responsive websites. Now it's just, obviously, we just do websites, and it mainly focuses on mobile experience because that's where everyone is. So voice will probably have a similar kind of trajectory in terms of becoming more mainstream over time.
I think in the shorter term, I'm quite excited by Google Lens, which is basically just, have you heard of this?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so basically you take a photo of something and it does a search for you. It's simple, essentially.
That is here and now, I think. I think that's closer than most people think, because the ASOS app thing, that scares the living daylights out of me. So I can take a picture of my blue polo, and then it will show me other blue polos for men. And then without telling it, I can just take a picture of, if it was a female instead of a male, it shows you female products, and it shows you products that go with that style. So if it was a blue polo, it might show you like a black pair of jeans or some chinos or whatever. I think that is also utilizing the technology, isn't it? So,
yeah, definitely.
It'll probably scale up over time. So when we're talking about SEO and we're talking about the industry in general, there are a few really kind of strong thought leaders in the space. We've touched on some of them in terms of where you get your resources from. But if you were giving people advice to kind of follow or check out content from any of the influencers in the industry, who are the main people to follow and listen to?
Surprise, Rand Fishkin.
Yeah.
Brian Dean, who's from Backlinko, I mentioned before. There's a really good podcast. I can't remember I think he's called Louis. And he runs a thing called Everyone Hates Marketers.
Yes.
Which is really cool.
Yeah, you put me onto that. I like that as well.
It's coming at it from a point of view of like, let's cut all the nonsense that goes on through marketing podcasts.
He's a French guy, right?
But I think he's French and living in Ireland.
Yeah, he covers a wide range of topics though, doesn't he?
Yeah.
And he has some good guests, and he does talk about some really strong things. One of the other ones you put me onto was the Shopify Masters series on Spotify podcast or any podcast system.
There's a new one that I've been listening to as well, which is like, what was the name of it? I think it's called SEO SAS.
Oh, right. Okay.
A mouthful.
Yeah. SEO SAS.
It's just two girls. I think they're in Leeds who are just like talking about SEO issues at the moment. So that's pretty interesting. And it's good to see kind of a female perspective as well on the industry, because
There just aren't enough females in the SEO space, Rob.
Yeah.
It's such a male. It's a bit like coding, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's a lot of initiatives now, like Innovate Her and a couple of others. Code Up, Code Academy, Northern Coders, all these people where they're trying to get women into, females into coding and these technical subjects, because it's been predominantly male dominated, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Which is, I always find that if you get a good balance in the team, you're always going to get the best results, because it shouldn't be, the nerds in Star Wars t-shirts that it probably was when I first joined the industry.
Disclaimer: neither of us are wearing Star Wars t-shirts.
Yeah. But I think it's mainly the tech industry in general, isn't it? That's kind of a trend that we need to see continue, and we've got a lot of kind of balance in our team, haven't we? With the people who we work, we get different perspectives and different skill sets on things. That's always a strong thing to do. So if someone was starting out in the industry, now just say this is somebody listening from they've just got the kind of grades from a university perspective. They think they want to work for an agency, and they think it's all roses. What advice would you give to someone if they were starting out in the industry, now?
I think your experience is always going to be more kind of useful to you than maybe a grade perhaps is. I realise, having worked at university, sometimes that's not the best thing to say, but same school kids. No, but definitely trying to get some experience behind you, whether that's like, putting on gigs like I did, or, if you've got a hobby, it could literally be anything, just having that kind of DIY ethos goes a long way, I think, to impress people.
And some practical experience always goes a long way. I've met apprentices and juniors and interns and people who want to come in at exec level, but they've never actually done anything. And then they turn around and say, well, what can I do? So I always say, well, do something for yourself. Start your own podcast, write, blog. You've got Instagram, you've got video, you've got YouTube, you've got so many resources that we didn't really have at the time. I feel really old. I'm only 33, but I feel really old when I talk to these guys and they're like, oh, well, I'm not really sure how this works. I'm like, Google it, you idiot. Like, what is wrong with you? When I was at school, it was like Encarta loading up a CD and it was whatever was on the CD, that's what you got. They have access to unlimited amount of information. And I think you do actually see that with the newer generation of kind of 21 and below who's in our agency and our business, and the people you work with. They're a lot more resourceful because they've got so many more resources available, and getting that experience is so important, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think for organizations that are kind of hiring younger people in the industry, it's kind of creating that environment where people kind of feel like they can put the hand up, well, not literally put the hand up, you know what I mean? They can say an idea, and that idea is going to have as much weight as someone who's the most senior person in the team. Yeah.
And you recently turned 30. Welcome to the club. It's shit. If you were looking back though, and you were going to give yourself some advice to your kind of 20-year-old self, what advice would you give yourself?
It's all going to be okay.
Don't worry. I think people do stress about it coming into the industry for the first time, and they do stress about, the first job and everything else. But at the end of the day, if you work, you just got to work hard, haven't you, I suppose?
Yeah, I think my experience at the time was, things were pretty difficult to get a job straight out of university because obviously there was the financial crash in 08.
Yeah.
So don't kind of let those circumstantial factors affect you too much. There's always a light at the end of the tunnel. There's always something that will come along, a brighter day.
Yeah.
And just keep chipping away at it, basically.
Yeah. Obviously at the time there was the financial crash. Now there's Brexit. There's always some factor in there. But I think one thing's for certain for anybody looking to get into this industry is Google's probably not going to go anywhere anytime soon. If anything, they're probably going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. I think the more you know about that, the better suited you'll be long term.
Yeah.
Right, okay, I'll wrap up now. Thanks very much, Rob. I really appreciate you taking the time out to kind of jump on the podcast as the first interview that I've done.
I'll be on the wall like Fraser Crane's studio, the portrait.
Yeah. So if anybody wanted to contact you or get in touch in future, where's the best place to find you? Is it LinkedIn? Or is it Twitter? Or
I think, add me on LinkedIn. That's the main kind of place to get in touch with any kind of questions. I'm always open to, anyone contacting me saying I've got this issue with SEO or, whatever it may be.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks very much, Rob. Cheers.
Thank you.